I love me a good horror game. The feeling of hopelessness when everything seems to be against you, or the feeling of dread when the game gives you so many items that you know that the next encounter will be a boss fight. Panic, dread, fear. These are just some of the many emotions that can race through our minds as we play horror games. However, the best horror games take these emotions and take them one step further. Instead of just giving the player a short rush of a certain emotion, they take these emotions and make them run with you throughout the rest of your playthrough, making the fear a constant. So that begs the question, how do horror games manage to create this persistent feeling? Some might say the scary mood or the way the gameplay makes you feel weak, but in my eyes, taking the recently released Dead Space remake by Motive, I find that the in-game lore and the world building to be the biggest factor in creating this lasting feeling of fear. So this is a video about why I love the lore and story and world building of Dead Space and why I believe it to be an essential part in creating the atmosphere of horror.
Thanks to this great.
Mercer, wait! Tell me. I want to understand. What is Convergence?
A prime reason how to fully immerse players into a game world is through the general world building and lore of the game. Good stories and backstories in games are those that start before the player's journey and are left open as to what could happen next after the player finishes the game. Just a completely random example, BoJack Horseman, amazing animated TV show whose story has so many questions and possible outcomes as to what happened to the cast before the events of the show and outcomes that race through your mind after its ending. Dead Space does that quite well, I believe. I haven't played Dead Space 2 or 3 yet, so I don't know what happens after, but the world building here is watertight. I've heard they've added stuff that links it better with the latter entries in the series, and also improved upon some surface level story moments from the original. We'll get to the story later on in this video, because that contains a lot of spoiler stuff, so for now I want to focus on how Dead Space manages to set up its world before we jump into it. Dead Space is set many centuries ahead in the future from our current time, in the 26th century. At this point in time, we as humans have expended all the natural resources that our home, Earth, has to offer, which in turn has led for organizations to pivot to search for resources on other planets, and in order to harvest resources from these planets, they use planet crackers. Planet crackers are essentially these big spacecrafts that head off and go mining on other planets, and the biggest and most successful planet cracker, or the first one I think, is the USG Ishimura, currently in the vicinity of the planet Aegis 7, the whole main setting for Dead Space. I really like this simple premise of sorts, as it can show some form of how we humans might not realize some of our destructive tendencies now, but that they can come back to haunt us later on in life, or even the people who we might not even know yet. A huge overarching butterfly effect in a way. Although this aspect isn't really talked about a lot in game, it is there and it is very present. It's just there, lingering until you pick up on it and realize how scary the thought is of having used up all of our natural resources on a planet that pushes us to harvest and claim resources for ourselves, demonstrating two factors that are important to flesh out the other scary lore stuff that happens. One being our will to survive, and two being one fatal flaw that we as humans inherently have: selfishness. Remember these two concepts for later, not really in depth, but just think about them, because I'll need to talk about some of the more backstory for our main crew, the folks on board the small craft, the USG Kellyan. On board we have 5 people: Johnston, Chen, Daniels, the chief of them, Hammond, and the man himself, Isaac Clarke. Although the Johnston doesn't play a super big role in the game, the other 4 are present throughout. These 5 individuals have been brought together and are tasked with repairing the blackout that happened aboard the Ishimura. Why only 5 people? Good question. Anyways, Isaac's girlfriend Nicole Brennan is working aboard the Ishimura as a doctor, and as any good partner, Isaac wants to check up on her as well, but his work comes first, as an engineer. It's also important to note that the tension aboard the Kellyan en route to the Ishimura can be cut with a knife. The game makes it very clear that these people don't know each other and all have their own motives and intentions that they don't want you to know about, and leads to some mental mind games between them. This unstable vibe is frightening. How would you feel if you were tasked with an important yet sudden emergency mission and people you'll be working with are complete strangers and they kinda hate each other as well? It leaves you thinking, can I really trust these people? Will they turn on me? Do they know more than they let on? Well, we'll find that out sooner or later, but that's a wrap for the setup of the game, and it's super well crafted. Although some of these emotions you won't think about directly, our subconsciousness picks up on it, and it's thought that is burned into your mind as you play the game. The best stories told are the ones that are grounded in their own worlds, meaning that they feel real for the setting that they are, well, set in. These are just good stories, great stories even, but scary stories, those are the ones that aren't just grounded to their reality, but also feel real to your world, our whole world. FNAF has some pretty scary lore, as its family restaurant setting feels so nostalgic and real, and so too does Resident Evil, where experiments can lead to some horrific and unwanted results to the normal guy. Dead Space's setting fits that, and by being set a few centuries ahead of time, it paints this dystopian Earth that we never see, but can imagine how it would be to live in a time like this. Again, just imagine the thought of how terrifying it is to think that our planet Earth has run out of resources. I mean, to me that's just scary. A lot of the story beats in Dead Space are based on the concept of the unknown and how we as humans would react to certain situations. Dead Space avoids the typical horror cliches where the characters just do dumb decisions because it's plot convenient. So when some questionable or dumb decisions are made, they're done through a very big story point, but I won't get ahead of myself here. The concept of aliens and outer space are subjects that we don't know much about, apart from some pretty far-fetching and bizarre conspiracy theories, and little information about the whole topic. The necromorphs are a perfect enemy that can elicit fear. Necromorphs, these pale, monstrous beings, have one core feature, that being that fatal wounds to a human aren't necessarily fatal to them. Headshots or a shot to the heart don't take them out, leaving you with the only choice of dismembering them limb by limb. First you take out the legs to render them immobile, and then the arms to make their primary source of attack weaker. It's a pretty grotesque scene to witness, but it's the only solution to take them out, unless you want to become one of them too. Throughout the game, we witness many times where corpses get infected and suddenly come back from the dead to become a necromorph. While, yes, it's pretty unrealistic that a corpse can get reanimated, the idea of something regrowing or coming back to life isn't as foreign as a concept as we may think. Take amphibians or some reptiles like geckos or axolotls. Animals that can regenerate tails after being cut off, and in the case of the axolotl, that can regenerate vital organs in its own body. I mean, we can even reach as far as, ourselves, you and me. Your liver can practically regenerate itself almost in its entirety, and it's this concept of the unknown powers of regeneration that Dead Space feeds on, questioning the player as to how far such a concept can go, making it feel very real. Another concept that can feel all too real in Dead Space is loneliness. Loneliness is one of the people's biggest fears. Autophobia, the fear of being alone. Many people strive to avoid this feeling as they're all reliant on social interactions, both small and big. Although Dead Space does have quite a few social interactions between the Kellion crew and some of the other characters in the story, for the most part you are alone even with all these interactions. On the surface level, yes, you are traversing the halls and rooms of the Ishimura alone, fighting off beings that can't be called human anymore, never knowing if you're alone with them. This is just the tip of the iceberg when we talk about this loneliness, because venturing off into the unknown and uncharted territory is something that we as humans struggle to do. Although we make most of our biggest changes in life by going outside of our comfort zone, ultimately, if it fails, we can resort to going back home. Home is out of the question here. You are forced to move through this death trap of a ship in order to make it home, and underneath all this, the biggest fear factor is being surrounded by people who you can trust or not trust. Being in a social group, yet feeling like you don't fit in or alone, gives off a different type of fear, like what they can do to you, or what they want to do towards you, what they think about you. You don't know Hammond or Daniels, and they don't know you. I have to give a lot of credit to the art direction and audio design of Dead Space here, because they really did a stellar job at making you feel alone and vulnerable and dread as you explored Ishimura. 10 out of 10 experience with the lights off. Moving on, there are only 2 instances, maybe more in the game, where you don't feel this feeling of loneliness, and I think this is a good time to segue into the story section of this video.
This is Dr. Elizabeth Cross. To all survivors, turn back. It's all gone.
Dead Space's story is, in my opinion, one of the best stories in video games. It's simple and easy to follow, really good mood setter, and has lots of lore that would interest those who want to dive a bit deeper into the world of Dead Space. Now, if you haven't played Dead Space Remake or the original and you don't want this story spoiled for you, I highly recommend you to skip to the next section of this video or click off the video entirely. Please, that's the spoiler warning. Okay, now that they're gone, we've got to be made whole again. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, with the tension between Daniels and Hammond being super high, the game keeps this up throughout, always keeping you guessing as to how much they know, and this again feeds into this dread and unknown fear as what they know or what they want you to think that they know. Hammond and Daniels disappear many times in the game, very conveniently at times, and when they do all reconnect over the live video calls, they still keep up this toxic tension that they have against each other. So when Hammond dies at the hands of the necromorph Chen, and Daniels responds pretty coldly, you're not feeling scared that, you're down, you've lost a crew member. The fear builds to a point where you think, how does she feel about me, or what is my use towards her? And in the end, the dread comes to a close when you realize Daniels was actually a spy and knew everything that was going on and was mostly in control of the people around her. She shoots Dr. Kine and zips away with the marker, leaving you and Nicole alone on the Ishimura. Why yes, the problem is resolved, the game leaves you thinking, if my biggest help throughout the whole experience and the journey I've been on has been deceiving me all this time, how can I trust anyone? And that's what takes us into the last reveal of Dead Space and final lore piece, the marker. I've only mentioned it once in this entire video, but it's an essential part to the whole story and Dead Space lore, and it's quite a spoiler as well since it's linked to one of the biggest antagonists of the game, the Church of Unitology. Unitology in a nutshell is a religion that believes that they can unite in death through this artifact called the marker. Now, I'm no Dead Space lore specialist, but from what I understood, the church managed to infiltrate the Ishimura in order to get close to the artifact on Aegis 7, thanks to one of their prophets or whatever, Dr. Mercer, who manages to influence and converts many people to give in to Unitology, to become whole again under the power of the marker, because the power of the marker not only has the effect to cognitively mess with the mind of the people, but can somehow recode the DNA of humans and turn them into necromorphs. You following? So this church here converts people, sending them into a deranged mental state and a downward spiral in life. I mean, this is a cult, no denying it. Cults are scary because you can see people live happy and preach relatively good morals, but behind closed doors are just not good people, taking advantage of others. It's a thought that is scary to think about, and seeing all the mentally ill people take their own lives aboard the Ishimura, the logs that show them slowly losing their sanity and going insane is sad and depressing. And that's just one way the marker impacts you, because I haven't gone into detail as how this marker affects Isaac, but you can probably see where this is going. Throughout the game, Isaac sees lots of videos of Nicole, and it creates an uneasy balance of whether or not they're hallucinations or not. So naturally, when we do find Nicole, we feel this sense of relief, and as we share the same goal with Isaac, fixing the ship and finding Nicole. Also, on the second encounter with Nicole, I got this pretty funny glitch, made me chuckle a bit, but yeah. When you do manage to transport the marker from the Ishimura to Aegis 7, as that is what Dr. Kine said was the solution to saving everyone, lots of the end of the world stuff happens, and then Daniels takes Nicole, traps Isaac, and forces him to watch a painful video of the hard truth that Nicole was dead, and this Nicole that we were interacting with was simply an effect the marker had on Isaac, and Nicole was actually Dr. Cross, a side character who was looking for her loved one, also under the effect of the marker, who thought Isaac to be her partner, Jacob Temple, early in the game. This whole twist shifts the tension and story drastically. What is real anymore? How does one become whole again? It shows us a dark truth of how sometimes we as people refuse to let go of the past, and instead of accepting the hard truths, we choose to create a false reality for ourselves, deluding ourselves into thinking that everything is okay when really everything is far from okay. Also, I really love the detail that taking the first letter of each chapter spells out Nicole is dead, which is some of the best foreshadowing or subtle detail, whatever it's called, that I've seen. Just overall, an incredible story and fascinating lore. World building is essential to create any good story or compelling game, and the more details there are that answer questions, leave loose ends, and overall feel real and lived in, those are the stories that feel the most real to us. Dead Space does this a lot with a grounded story not just to its own world, but feels real enough to be a future projection of our own world, with many real elements that are taken a bit too extreme, but don't feel so far-fetched, and for a story that I would recommend anyone to dive into and uncover for themselves. I might be reading too much into this, or the lore and everything, but Dead Space leaves me, well, with a dead space of thought, of new fears and shower thoughts that are truly terrifying. And with that, welcome to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through, it means a lot to me. I love Dead Space Remake, it's such a good game, and I recommend anyone to try it. This survival horror great, and one of the best remakes out there. I hope that this video was fun to watch, and let me know what were your favorite parts about Dead Space, or Dead Space Remake, or Dead Space 1. Yeah, leave them down below, along with any support or critiques about how I can improve these types of videos. But anyways, I've got to finish up the next video because it's a super long one, the Resident Evil 4 retrospect video. Surprisingly, I'll have made 2 horror-themed videos in the span of 2 weeks by the time it releases, and it isn't even October. So guess it's early Halloween, but that's enough for me. Thanks so much again for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, night, and week, and I hope to see you in the next one. So with that, Storm out.